Sunday, December 21st, 1997. Week 17 of the NFL season, and the Detroit Lions are hosting the New York Jets in a high-profile game on NBC. Barry Sanders was on the verge of a 2,000-yard rushing season, and the Lions themselves needed a win to go to the playoffs. 77,624 people roared with excitement in anticipation of the game. With 13 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and the Lions up 13-10, Jets quarterback Neil O'Donnell got behind center to start a crucial drive. Then he just stopped and turned to the referee behind him before calling a timeout. After returning from the stoppage, the Jets got set, the Lions crowd roared, and O'Donnell just stood at his post, staring at the referee. In confusion, the referee blew the play dead. Due to a largely forgotten rule, the referee asked the crowd to quiet down. This was met naturally with a massive boo. Upon the whistle to start play, O'Donnell got under center to relative quiet, but as soon as he readied for play, the crowd roared again, and again, play was stopped. The ref cued the PA and warned the crowd to be quiet or have their Lions charged with a timeout or a 5-yard penalty. At odds with everything we know about sports and crowds today, the Lions players all turned to the crowd, motioning them to be quiet for a crucial series in a game leading them to the playoffs. This is what you don't know about crowds and crowd noise. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hi, y'all.
And today we're going to discuss a topic that everyone, at least everyone our age, probably takes for granted, and that's crowded games, number one, but they're also their participation in them. There's nothing like the electricity in a crowd before a big fight. When a team has a tremendous third down stop on a key strikeout or hit, a clutch basket, or a goal in a hotly contested Stanley Cup playoff. But that has not always been the case. Blake, what is the loudest crowd reaction that you've ever experienced or can remember, like, watching?
So prefacing this before I start, I had definitely taken crowd noise for granted because we're in a time now where there's limited crowd noise, or when you do hear it, it's fake. Like they cut the soccer noise from FIFA and just stuck it in the NBC Sports broadcast or something. And you can tell it's not real, of course, but I definitely took it for granted. So even something like golf on a Sunday is incredibly impacted by the crowds that are at the course. Yeah, I'd never known. So with that said, the crowd noise scenario that I remember, maybe not the most, but the one that impacted me the most, let's say, because of my emotional attachment to the team that it happened to, was the 2017 Elite Eight tournament game between UNC and Kentucky. UNC was a 1 seed, Kentucky was a 2 seed. Whoever won that game was going to win the championship. There was no doubt. Kentucky had Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, and of course, that was the UNC championship team. And I remember it I can remember it extremely vividly. So UNC goes on a 12-0 run, goes up by 7 points. De'Aaron Fox hits a 3. Malik Monk hits a 3. Justin Jackson thankfully got an easy score at one end. Malik Monk hits a second 3 and ties it at 73 with like 5 seconds left. Theo Pinson's bringing it down the court. Luke May, he had no idea what he was doing on this play. He was just running down beside Theo with his arms out like, I'm open, even though he wasn't. Theo got double teamed. You could tell they almost ran into each other in the paint. So Luke May takes 2 steps backwards. Theo somehow finds him. I don't know how. And about 2 feet in front of the 3-point line, Luke May lets it go. And he sinks it. and they win the game by those 2 points. Like, I got chill bumps thinking about it because I can remember watching it. That sent them to the Final Four, and then, of course, they went on to win the national championship that year. But again, that being the most vivid crowd noise memory only illustrates the point that crowd noise is important, especially for a fan of a team who has such passionate fans as the UNC Tar Heels do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely something that adds to the experience, whether you're a fan of the team or not. And we see this sometimes in those NCAA tournament games, like early on where the crowd's not full and it's just kind of random people from the town that the game is in, and it's not necessarily hardcore fans. You lose some of that atmosphere, and it's just different. I think for me, the loudest crowd I've ever been in is from last year's Carolina Hurricanes playoff run, starting with the last home game of the regular season when they made the playoffs for the first time in a decade. It was, you understand on television when they're saying that something is like loud and it's deafening and it's crazy, but it really was. You walked out with your ears ringing from those games. And what we're getting on television right now isn't necessarily that. Some sports I think are doing better than others, but I don't, like, where are you on like the fake crowd noise situation?
I would rather listen to the players communicate than hear the fake crowd noise. That's just me. I don't know why. I like obviously crowd noise means a lot to me and my experience in watching the game, whether it's on TV or in person, but just knowing that it's not authentic bothers me.
It is weird. And we've only had a couple of situations where you had the opportunity to not hear it. I think that MLS's back tournament, ESPN did not use fake noise. Nope. Fox, in general, Fox Sports has been very clear that they are doing everything possible to add crowd noise. They've got virtual fans on their Saturday baseball game, which is ridiculous to me. And yeah, I think having watched it, the MLB is taking like a backseat to it. They've got it going through the PA, but I think a lot of their broadcasters are just kind of turning it down unless it's necessary.
And in a normal year, you're in trouble for piping crowd noise. The Atlanta Falcons got fined.
Yeah, and Minnesota,
not that long ago, because it was just a few years ago. But they got caught piping crowd noise into their new arena, and they got in trouble for it. They got fined or something. I can't remember the exact penalty, but they got in trouble for it. But in any other year, doing that is terrible. It's a bad idea. Yet today, for some reason, they think it's okay.
Yeah, and the NFL released actual guidelines for what you could use this year. Apparently, they've been recording audio at stadiums, and so they said, here, these are your authentic crowd reactions. You may use this at these decibel levels, and we've got like observers to make sure that you're not using other files and you're not doing this, because the NFL is just stodgy and uptight about everything anyway.
So what I don't understand is, how do they, like during a soccer match, say, is there someone sitting there with an authentic home crowd goal scored reaction, like just ready to press the button? And it's like they just have to stare at the game, watch diligently, and as soon as the home team scores, they hit that button and make the noise like it's supposed to?
Yeah, from what I've read, the leagues that are doing it in the stadium, that are using like the PA to pipe it in, there is an audio engineer. That's his job to orchestrate, I guess, for lack of a better word, the
maestro,
the sound effects of the game. And then in the league, the sports where the broadcaster's putting it in, I think that's somebody's job too, is to sit there and this is what we would play and this is what we would do. I think in the NBA, it's like an arena's audio engineer is with the broadcaster or whatever to pump in authentic songs.
They're just pumping whatever sounds correct.
Yeah,
based on what the commentators are saying.
Yeah, it's just not authentic.
No.
The NBA, I think, has done the best job of the fake crowd noise to me.
Okay.
Because you can't see the crowd. You see the players, the camera angles, don't show the fact that there's nobody there, but it still is just abrupt sometimes. Somebody makes a shot and suddenly it's loud, and then suddenly it's quiet again, and it's
it just doesn't, like, OG Anunoby hit a 3 in Game 3 just recently against the Celtics for the Raptors, and he hits this 3 at any other time, any other year in the playoffs, and it would have been like Ray Allen hitting the 3 for the Heat back a few years ago. Bang! That reaction is what does it. Like that yeah, I get an emotional reaction. I don't know why basketball does it to me better than any other sport, but when somebody lets go of a long shot, and I can remember vividly a few times where Carolina was on the raw end, like losing a national championship at a buzzer.
that was a great day.
Oh God, I want to throw up every time I watch it. And then even Austin Rivers hitting a 3 in a Duke Carolina game,
That was another great day.
still want to puke. And he shoots it over Tyler Zeller. I don't know, like, he should have known he was going to take it, and I can't believe he made it, but he did. And it was in the Dean Dome, and I wanted to puke all over the place, but it happens. The one that hits me the most is Chris Jenkins hitting it. Just oh my God! See, I'm getting mad. I need to.
Basketball's the most affected, though. I think we like football has a lot of crowd noise. Other sports, baseball can get loud.
Yeah.
But that
Only
sudden
playoff
eruption, playoff baseball.
Only
yeah.
playoff baseball.
That sudden eruption, though, because you're right. Like, think about a home run. That's not a you can hear the sound of the bat. You can see the trajectory of the ball. In most cases, you still have to wait to make sure that thing's gone before you go crazy. A strikeout is immediate.
Strikeouts are good. Like, playoff strikeouts are really good. Like, especially to win games. Like, hockey goals are good.
Hockey goals are
because
immediate.
when that buzzer, the light goes on and the buzzer goes off. Especially in a home crowd, everybody just jumps to their feet.
And basketball has that too.
Basketball's
goes
the same thing. When they let that thing go from half court, the world stops.
Yeah.
You're just like, you're glued. You can't move. I can't anyways.
And I think on TV it's even better because the sound effect, the mic picks up the ball hitting the back of the rim and going through the net.
Boom.
So you get a base hit, and then you get the crowd going crazy at the same time. So it definitely feels.
And the commentators being into it and being in the arena makes a world of difference than like Taylor Twellman commentating the soccer match from 2,000 miles away.
And having the crowd around them makes a difference because it elevates their excitement. Instead of them talking like us right now, every sport has a tendency to sound like golf right now because nothing is going on around those people. Even if they're in the arena, it's
the commentators just aren't as excited. You can just tell their reactions aren't as strong as they would have been if they were surrounded by fans.
Mm-hmm. The craziest thing about all this is that it is kind of normal for us now to not have people in the stands, although it's still weird, but it's not the first time that sports has had to deal with this situation. They are mostly isolated instances, but they have happened before. And I will say, in most cases, these are going to happen in foreign countries, particularly in foreign soccer leagues. In France, they actually have rules where they threaten teams, depending on their fans' behavior, they threaten teams with games being played behind closed doors as a deterrent for hooliganism and some of the more nefarious aspects of soccer culture.
So what started that?
So if you've ever watched a soccer game, it's not quite as bad in the Premier League. So if that's the thing you watch, now certainly they have fans that will fight each other in a heartbeat.
And they have Eric Dyers who will run into the stands and confront those fans.
That's true too. And they continually have a racist problem in the Premier League with chanting things at players, which is not great. But if you've watched other leagues, you see that they love smoke grenades. It's just a thing. Flares, all kinds of stuff need to happen in order for you to enjoy a soccer game, apparently. And in France, this got so big that they actually penalize you monetarily for every smoke grenade that makes its way to the pitch. And after a certain number, they will remove fans from the game. They'll say, "We're done. Your next home game is without people. You play it behind closed doors. You'll get no revenue. You're just out."
And this only works in this only works in European soccer because there's no revenue sharing among the teams.
That's it. Yeah, in America, it's not exactly like this, but you think of the teams as franchisees of the league. They're all one thing. It's why in the Malice in the Palace situation, Ron Artest gets suspended forever, but the next Pacers home game, the next Pistons home game, everybody's there.
Right.
But in Europe, yeah, it's a sanctioning body and the clubs just play, so they don't care. They're just like, hey, we got another team that'll take your spot. If you go bankrupt, we're fine.
Right.
So get your stuff together.
It only hurts the individual team because there's no revenue sharing. No fans being in one arena for one game only hurts that team.
That's right.
For ticket sales and such.
Nobody else's revenue. None of the players' salaries are impacted. So it's happened in Italy. In 2007, they had some riots, not cultural, like civil rights kind of riots like we would see in 2020 going crazy. These were actual fan riots, upset about referees' calls.
Like during games.
During games, outside of games, just not a good look for the league in general. So they just played with no fans for a little bit, and then certain clubs were targeted specifically to go longer. And even there used to be the European Cup, but now we would think of that as the Champions League. Those games have had semifinals and finals played with nobody because a team had people go crazy, which is less and less likely as we move forward in soccer culture, but still a thing.
Yeah, European soccer fans are crazy. Like probably the most passionate. In my opinion, they might be the most passionate sports fan of any other sport is European soccer. Because that's everything. That's everything over there.
It's so ingrained in culture, and it's like the only sport that's followed like that. I mean, it's a big deal.
Like
we have four leagues.
Their football, of course, is soccer.
Yeah.
They don't have American football, of course. They have professional basketball leagues, but it's not nearly what the NBA is to us here. And then, of course, they don't have baseball either. Mm-hmm. So their soccer is everything.
Yeah.
So there is a time to be passionate. There is a time to be a passionate fan. But
don't go fight anybody over it.
Don't just calm down, people. Don't take it too far.
It's not that deep. This situation is rarer here in North America, but it has happened. You may remember back in 2015, there were riots happening in Baltimore in fear of people not being able to get safely to the game or something erupting at the game. The Orioles and Major League Baseball did close a game against the White Sox in Baltimore to no one. And that was interesting because that was a game where I think it's Gary Thorne is his name. He's the Orioles play-by-play announcer. He actually called an inning, including a home run, as if it was a golf broadcast. Just very subdued and whispering because of the weird circumstances they were in.
Well, you feel compelled to talk quieter when you don't have to talk over crowd noise.
Yeah.
Like same in basketball. The commentators inside the arenas, their authentic reactions are so because they have so many people around them who are yelling and screaming. They have to talk over, even though the mic's right in front of their face. They still have to be louder than the 20,000 people that are in the arena around them. So it kind of makes sense, but it's just funny. Like it just illustrates the point that that's what crowds do.
Yeah. You mentioned golf earlier. The PGA Tour has had tournaments, also played in front of no one. In 2012, the AT&T National from Bethesda, that's in Maryland, and the 2016 Farmers Insurance Open from San Diego, both of them had parts of the tournament delayed and played in front of no gallery because severe weather came in. There were floods in one instance, just high winds overnight in another instance that tore trees down and made the area generally unsafe for people. If you've ever been to a golf tournament or if you've ever watched one on TV and thought about it, the galleries are traveling in the areas next to trees, between holes, through these the paths that connect holes. And so with trees being down, and in some cases, I think one of those was like violent winds. The trees are snapping in half.
Oh, goodness.
So you just got sharp, edges everywhere. They didn't let
weapons
people in.
just flying around in the wind.
And you can't delay a golf tournament for a day because there's another one next week, right? So while people were trying to clean up, they just kept playing, and
They had to make sure that the fans were safe. That was a public safety thing, similar to what we have going on right now.
very similar to that,
but obviously different.
more isolated. Here in North Carolina,
The
AHL's Charlotte Checkers have twice played games in snow and ice storms in which the opposing team and the officials had made it to the arena ahead of the game time, mostly because it was so severe they went ahead and came into the building. But they decided that it wasn't safe and ideal for people to travel, so they went ahead and played the game without fans. Safety concern seems to be the reason for why we don't have people here, and only a few times, but it's happened.
I would say, side note, Charlotte, North Carolina, probably snows once, maybe twice a year. It ices more than it snows. So this obviously doesn't happen very often, because even when it does snow, it would have to snow on a day of a game during, or it's the severe weather is coming while the game is happening. So obviously it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Continuing, kind of this one is a joke, but it actually happened. The other instance in American sports where we had no fans was in Charleston, the Lesser Carolina, where minor league team Charleston River Dogs, they played in front of no fans, and
Quote,
that's
unquote.
Yeah, that's in air quotes. Essentially what happened is it was, minor league baseball they love their promotions and goofy things to get people to show up. It's fun. It's part of why everybody likes minor league baseball if you're in.
Cheap tickets and quirky actions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the deal. Go watch the mascot jump over the pitching. I mean, it's just like whatever. So they had a deal where they wanted to set an attendance record of 0. So the way baseball attendance is tracked, when the game becomes official halfway through the 5th inning, that's when they count attendance. So in the middle of that inning, no one was in the stands. They did not let anyone into the actual seating area. However, 1,800 people were below the stadium and outside the stadium in concourses and concession stands and merchandise booths. And as soon as they said, all right, we have an official attendance of 0, they opened up the bleachers and suddenly 1,800 people were there to watch.
So hopefully there were enough TVs in the concourse areas that people could actually watch the game, because it would really suck if you were a legitimate fan of the Charleston River Dogs to be stuck where you can't see the field. You can't see any of the things that are happening. Of course, the crowd's not doing anything because there's no crowd, so you don't actually know what's happening, but you might hear a good smack of a baseball.
Yeah.
And you wonder, what was that? And then you don't know. So hopefully they could actually tell what was going on, or else they just showed up, they just walked in the middle of the 5th and their team was losing like 20-0. That would have really made me happy.
I'm out. Yeah. It's like, I paid for this ticket. I did not watch any of this happen.
Right. So they paid from the start. So are they inside the...
They let them in the gates. So all this is to say that it's rare, but people playing in front of no one has happened, probably for the same reasons it's happening now. In most cases, fan safety of some shape, form, or fashion. But that's not really our main focus today, because we started with our intro about Neil O'Donnell begging for the crowd to be quiet. And so we're going to talk about the time when crowd reaction was specifically targeted as a bad thing. By the late 70s, sports fans were beginning to understand that they could play a role and affect the outcome of games. This coincides, if you watch games from the time, with the eye test, because college football season is just starting, so we have to talk about the eye test. That's so stupid.
College playoff.
It matches the eye test, though, showing the makeup of crowds at those games. If you watch games before that, you will see people well-dressed, ties, fedoras, and those were gone by this point. And in its place, we started to see crowds become more modern, wearing merchandise of the team. Coaches at both the college and pro level of football decried the new loud stadiums. 49ers coach George Seifert asked for a football game that did not turn into a rock concert.
Rock concert.
Because whenever you're yelling at a cloud, you got to compare it to rock and roll, Legendary Iowa coach Hayden Fry actually threatened to pull his team off the field at Ohio State due to the volume, which I'm sure made the Ohio State University very excited. His athletic director actually wondered whatever happened to sportsmanship?
So that's an interesting point because the mindset of so imagine this being in the 70s or 80s, right? Say you're a 60-year-old head coach in 1980. You were born in 1920. You grew up watching sports. Everyone was really well dressed. Everyone was wearing ties. There's no face paint. There's no signs. There's no billboards inside the arena saying, "Get loud, pump it up, blah, blah, blah." That wasn't a thing. So when that starts to come along, and of course in your old and gritty nature, you don't want change. So that can probably be really upsetting for these people, I could imagine.
Yeah, and that seems to be, the more I've looked into it, that was the crux of the problem. Not making it all like old people hate loud, but that's not it. But just that the idea of sportsmanship, that we all have a fair run at this in a game, seemed to be the issue. Here in ACC country, where we reside, post-game write-up in the Tiger Insider for Clemson's 1980 homecoming game against Bill Dooley's Virginia Tech ended up being a referendum on a rule that would eventually be passed about crowd noise. Virginia Tech tried several times to force the referees to silence the loud crowd inside Death Valley, and in a weird twist of fate, eventually the Virginia Tech team was called for a delay of game because they kept asking and kept asking and they kept asking. And finally the referee said, "Snap the ball." They didn't. It was a delay of game. As an article in The Athletic describes it, some people were even looking to put these rules in place for basketball. One AD is quoted as saying, "Perhaps a free throw will once again become just that, a free throw."
So this wasn't a rule in basketball.
This never became a thing in basketball.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
So this was right. So this is just college football and just NFL, primarily college football and NFL.
That is the crux, yeah.
Okay.
The rule that actually became in place in the NFL and the NCAA, and the one that we discussed in our intro, is that essentially if a crowd became so loud that the opposing team, usually the offense, if they could not call a play, get lined up, and be able to execute the play, then they could ask the referee to stop play. Essentially asking the crowd to subdue themselves so that the offense could hear and operate efficiently. And we know that's the case still, not the rule, but the idea that the offense can't hear because offenses in college and the NFL run silent counts now where they say, "Look, we're going to get to the line and we're going to get set, and then on 3 we're going. Everybody be ready."
Or I hike my leg as the quarterback, like the guard. You can see the guard. The guard will turn around, see the quarterback motion. The guard will turn straight, smack the center on the leg, and then in one count, the center hikes it.
And everybody's just watching the ball to see when they're going, and that's it. But that innovation hasn't happened when these rules are being placed. So the quarterback's still trying to change a play or sometimes call out a play, and then he's trying to hike it and nobody can hear him. The center can't hear him, like right there in front of him. And so they passed this rule that if the home team did not comply, they could be charged a timeout for the stoppage, similar to the way injury rules go. They could also, if they had no timeouts or if the referee was just fed up, they could charge them a 5-yard penalty.
That's unbelievable. That's just I can't fathom that.
Yeah,
I can't fathom that ever being a thing, and it was still a thing in my lifetime.
It absolutely was.
I just don't remember it.
It absolutely was.
But wow.
Yeah, the first year this was in place, things got so bad that, and maybe we can do an episode on this dude. He's just boisterous and crazy. He was a linebacker for the Seahawks named Brian Bosworth.
The Boz.
That's right. He is just a crazy dude. But even he, in a preseason game, was waving his arms downward to try and quiet the Seahawks crowd. And the Seahawks crowd, in the Kingdome, and now in whatever that stadium is called now, I think it's changed its name before. Is it CenturyLink?
Yes.
CenturyLink. But that fan base is loud in every sport.
And to be fair, that fan base set the Guinness World Record for the loudest crowd noise ever at like 137 decibels.
That's intense. That's
That's
actually deafening.
That's louder than a fighter jet taking off of an aircraft carrier. Unbelievable. 130. I think a rock concert is only like 80. It's like twice as loud as a rock concert.
Yeah. And he's asking these people
to be quiet.
Please quiet down. There were signs held up in the Metrodome, another historically loud situation. The signs kind of sarcastically were asking the crowd for whispers and silence rather than loud goodness. You know, just like a silent golf clap.
Imagine the Minnesota Vikings fans just golf clapping after a first down.
Yeah, so appreciative of the efforts. There was an op-ed in the Washington Times that said the rule was essentially asking fans to watch football as if they were at Wimbledon, which again is another quiet situation.
Quietish. I mean, after a good score, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in between play, yeah, it's definitely, it can be loud, but while the game is happening, it's almost like a golf shot. Like you're kicked off a golf course during a major or something.
Oh, if you go crazy.
If you go nuts while the players are trying. Like Tiger Woods once did that where he hit a bad shot because someone spoke too soon. He shanked it and he snapped towards this guy. Like that's just not okay. So that's what they're wanting for football at the time.
Mm-hmm. Craziness. Legendary Hall of Famer, greatest coach of all time. That's only half partisan. Joe Gibbs said that it's an example of going backwards. And as Blake mentioned a second ago, you may think that this would have been a thing of the past, right? We're sitting here in 2020. We know that crowds get loud. We know that things are exciting and everybody's just go crazy, people. You would be absolutely wrong. It's not really called, but as recently as 2006, when Roger Goodell became the commissioner of the NFL, he's on record in the New York Times saying, that's what our game is about. Our athletes and coaches playing at the highest possible level and being able to execute their game plans. To some extent right now, I think we are hindering that a little bit because they come into an opposing stadium and they are not able to put the full offense in. They are not able to run plays. They are not able to change plays at the line of scrimmage.
Imagine NFL, like I'm imagining a Raiders game without that guy in the spiky shoulder pads and that was a thing in this century, in this millennium, just 14 years ago from this recording.
Yeah.
That was still a thing.
Not only was that still a thing, in the time period that these rules were being put in, crowds in Denver were throwing batteries at people. Crowds in Cleveland, because they're the dog pound, were throwing dog bones at opposing players.
Like snacks.
I think they were actually like hard. But
I'm imagining the milk bones.
Yeah, just a milk bone being tossed at somebody. I think in this case they were actually harmful.
The Nyla bones.
Yeah.
The big...
But the thing that they targeted was crowd noise because that was unsportsmanlike.
I can imagine though how good of a product it might be. Like how many more points might be scored though if the offense could truly fully communicate during every single drive in an NFL game. That might put on a better show, right? More teams would score. And like in every sport, we're all about high scores now. Like Patty Mahomes throwing bombs, touchdown passes.
Yes, everybody, you must give me feedback right now.
Right, yeah.
So it's
the immediate thing. Like all we want to do is jack up threes in the NBA and in college basketball is slowly adopting that, except Roy Williams because we still run two centers.
Way to go, Roy! Keep it up, man.
So we'll see how that goes. But it's that immediate reaction where like Dame Lillard's shooting from half court, but for some reason. I can almost see the argument in which it would be a better product.
But you would lose the drama and the excitement of that large crowd feeding into it.
That is, yeah, you would be losing some of the atmosphere, some of the atmosphere that you and I know.
Right.
That obviously wasn't a thing 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But some of that atmosphere that like I get so much excitement out of as a fan. When the fans go nuts, I love it. And that's, I mean, if I'm in there, I'm going nuts. I love it. It's fine. But I can see the argument in which if both offenses could run exactly as they did in practice without having to do silent counts, without having to run protections by just tapping and pointing and stuff, like you could actually communicate, that might actually have been a better product on the field, right?
It absolutely could, but at the same time, it is, I guess the point about sportsmanship is something to be said, but everybody gets 8 home games and everybody plays 8 road games. So you have your opportunity 8 times in the NFL to benefit from the crowd noise. They make it fair because you get to play your division opponents home and away. And if you play well enough, then the playoff game, your reward is being at home and having your fans impacted. But in a vacuum, absolutely. Right. Being able to run it like you did in practice. And we may see that this year in the NFL.
And I'm curious to see, because some stadiums are going to allow 20% capacity. Yeah. Some aren't going to allow any at all.
Yeah, they had 17,000 at Kansas City for the first game.
So it'll be interesting to see how the NFL teams conduct their stuff, and this is going to be like a perfect, God, please don't let us regress to not having crowds because the product is too good now.
That's not happening.
You know what I mean? That would be bad. But it'll be interesting to see how they work their stuff.
Yeah, if it was true science, I don't know that we're going to get a good outcome this year, because I do think in most cases teams are traveling on the day of. So the benefit you gain of being the road team with no fans, you might lose in some situations because you're on a bus from Philadelphia to New York on the morning of the game. And we all know how we feel after hour-long bus rides or hour-long car rides. You're not fresh, you're not crisp, you're not well-rested. No matter what you did the night before, it just drains you for whatever reason, sitting down doing nothing.
Those will probably equal themselves out. Yeah, on some level.
One more thing, and to the NFL's credit, I kind of get this, but it was not until 2013 that stadiums were allowed to display signs and images encouraging loud volume. That's 2013 before you can have the pump it ups and the let's go
get loud,
all of that stuff. Now I will say that some of those things aggravate me personally. For Braves fans, there are a lot of you that are present. I'm just going to let you know that we went to a Braves game one time. They're playing the Mets, division rival. The bases, I feel like the Braves were down. They've got guys in scoring position. I want to say the bases are loaded. And a guy's coming up with the potential. I think there's either nobody out or one out. Guy's coming up. He's got an opportunity to catch up and break the game open, honestly. It was like a 1-0, 2-0 game. So bases loaded, no out, 1 out. That's a good chance. Everybody's just kind of sitting there. And then after the first pitch, they put up the get loud thing. And all of a sudden, people go crazy. And it's like, what are you doing? You needed that?
You had to be reminded that, hey, we can affect the outcome of a game.
Yeah.
Or can we?
So I think we've got some numbers on what crowds do to games.
So I found it interesting after thinking about this topic for a while. And I'm wondering, was it just a tradition-based thing where the coaches in the 70s and the 80s and even in 2006 with the NFL commissioner, for goodness sake, what were they afraid of? Was it just a tradition thing, or were they actually afraid that the product on the field or the ice or the court or whatever would be worse? Like, do crowds affect the outcomes of games? Well, luckily, some really smart people did some stuff, and there's somewhat mixed reviews, but I'll let you decide. So I've got a few scholarly articles here that talk about different things. So the first one is called A Natural Experience to Determine the Crowd Effect Upon Home Court Advantage. This was written by Boudreau, Sanders, and Walia. I hope I said that right. Part of the article said, the team designated as home team in a contest enjoys a largely sympathetic crowd due primarily to season ticket sales. Moreover, crowd effects are sizable in motivating a home team win, raising the likelihood of such an event by between an estimated 21 and 22.8 percentage points.
That's
That's significant.
Yeah, that's significant. That's pretty.
That's a lot of an effect.
That's pretty clear. Yeah.
Those numbers are somewhat irrelevant, but they go on to say the point estimate implies that essentially the entire home advantage between two teams is attributed to the crowd effect.
So there's no real based on their analysis, there's no real effect of playing here or there or anywhere.
Like familiarity with the field, familiarity with the facility, familiarity with the area, short travel times.
All of that is less,
according to them, yes.
All that's less important than the actual fans.
Allegedly.
Okay.
So the next one is also interesting. This one was big. Really big study. This one's called Long-Term Trends in Home Advantage in Professional Sports in North America and England. They covered a time span of 1876 to 2003. Written by Pollard and Pollard. They analyzed over 400,000 sporting games. They took into account National League and American League Baseball, NFL, NHL, NBA, and the 4 levels of professional football in England. One of the quotes, "The trends and changes provide some evidence that travel and familiarity contribute to home advantage, but little in support of crowd effects."
So we have an opposing viewpoint here.
Yeah.
So here the travel and the familiarity of the building and the floor and the arena and all that stuff, being home, I mean, all the stuff that comes with, like being in your own house, is more important
right
than the crowd. So we got two different viewpoints.
Two different viewpoints, yes. This may have been the study that talked about the Staples Center in Los Angeles when the Clippers and the Lakers play. They're both familiar with the place. They basically just switch locker rooms every once in a while. But there's probably more Lakers. Well, I don't know. The Clippers are doing okay. But historically, there have always been more Lakers fans at these games than Clippers fans, just because who wanted to be a Clippers fan besides Marcellus Wiley before they got good?
That's right.
But, so, yeah, that's an opposing idea. The next one I found is titled Crowd Noise as a Cue in Referee Decisions Contributes to the Home Advantage. So they looked at whether or not crowd noise affected the decisions of a referee in-game. One quote from that article, "We propose that crowd noise correlates with the criteria referees have to judge. As crowd noise is a valid cue, referee decisions are strongly influenced by crowd noise." So I guess if you think about it, when say you're the home team, your stadium's full of people, full of fans, and one of your players gets fouled, say on a soccer game. One of your players gets fouled, the stadium's going to erupt, whether it was a real foul or not. Like their player goes down, they're going to erupt. The referee probably feels some sort of compelling push to call something there, right?
Absolutely.
They would feel some sort of like, oh, maybe that was worse than I thought, or maybe just the pressure of all these people that's gonna help you make the decision.
Yeah, that's the one I knew about or had heard about, is that the crowd's effect was on the referees more than anything else. That
like referees
created an implicit bias to
right.
please the people that are yelling at me.
Right. Referees give more yellow cards to visiting players because of crowd noise, because of the crowd effect in the stadium. Which
makes sense, because if you're looking at soccer, all of those teams play each other twice. So if it's constantly the visiting team gets more yellows, eventually that's the home team of this game is the visiting team over there. So
right.
that would help prove that, yeah.
So another one, they talked about goals being scored in soccer matches. This was a University of Naples study in 2014. They said, at games where a side had larger support out in force for them, that team would score around 0.45 more goals than their opponents and have a higher probability of winning outright.
I get that.
So they're just more likely to win games, and they're more likely to score goals. They score an average of almost a half a goal per game. Mm-hmm. So the home effect for a home team gives you a goal every 2 games, essentially.
Right. And anecdotally, that's something we know, right? Usually teams play better at home than on the road, but it's just unclear whether or not that's the crowd or just familiarity and routine.
Yeah. And that study also said that the ref would be more likely to decide in a team's favor if their supporting crowd was larger and noisier. So say you're like the Houston Astros of 10 years ago, you couldn't sell a single ticket to a regular season game. You're not getting any calls because you're not getting any boos. You're not getting any reaction. The ump doesn't feel any pressure from anybody. He's calling he's calling whatever he wants because there's nobody in there.
And then if you're a Houston Astros from 2 years ago, then you're glad there are at least a few people there. So when you're beating on the trash can to let everybody know what's coming, you aren't being so obvious about it. So that's good. Yep.
Strike.
It's a change up coming. two clicks.
So two more interesting things that I found. A New York Times analysis actually showed that penalties, particularly noise-related ones like offensive holding or false starts, have increased over time since this crowd noise thing has slowly diminished and crowds have more effect on games. They also said that more penalties are called in dome stadiums, especially false starts, because domes tend to be louder. Unless you're CenturyLink Field in Seattle and you just don't care, you're going to be louder outdoors than you are in a dome. But domes tend to be louder, and that's supposedly, according to the New York Times analysis, more false starts and more penalties are called in dome stadiums, which could possibly be attributed to crowd noise.
Now, that one I completely get, because those are the penalties that would happen. Because can't hear, not sure what's going on. You end up in a delay of game, miscommunication. Somebody moves early because they don't understand the count. They forgot the count, so they move early.
Or they're just scared. They're just shaking.
Terrified of all these people who are not actually going to hurt us, but they sound like
the fans are going to get me.
Yeah.
So, and the last one I found I thought was really interesting, talked about free throw performance in basketball. Quote, free throws constitute 35% of the points scored, and in games decided by 9 points or less, free throws comprised 48% of the winning team's points during the last 5 minutes and 69% during the last minute of the game. So this article didn't directly speak to the noise aspect of the crowd, but it spoke to the importance of late game scenarios in basketball. Mm-hmm. Almost 70% of your points in the last minute of a game are going to be scored at the free throw line, which in a quiet court, in a quiet arena,
for the home team,
it's going to be silent. It's going to be like practice. If you can like not stare at all the people and stuff, the stress doesn't get to you or anything. But imagine that last minute at an opposing arena and the fans are jumping around with signs and like say you're in Cameron and they're doing their stupid stuff like they do behind the goals and because they're weird and so they're doing all this stuff behind the goals and you have to drown that out. But that crowd noise has an effect on whether or not you can make those shots, right?
Surely, yeah, it absolutely does. Just from a human psychology point of view, I mean, if you can block it all out, then you truly are at the kind of highest level of your performance there.
Yeah,
because that is all that noise being directed at you negatively is something that you have to react to mentally. And so if you can block it out, that's impressive.
There's nothing worse than your team being down in the last minute of a basketball game and they foul your freshman center.
Yeah.
That, again, just makes me want to throw up because you know what's about to come. They're going to brick them both. Like, there is no shot. Absolutely no chance they're making that.
My man is not ready for this point.
Oh, quick thing. What happened to that game, that Lions and Jets game?
Yeah, so to kind of bring this around and put a bow on it, 13-10 score, I quoted it to you with 13 minutes left, was the final score of the game. So the Lions and their crowd moved on, won the game. They got a spot in that year's playoffs in the NFC.
And Barry Sanders completed his 2,000-yard season, correct?
He did get a 2,000-yard season as well in that game. And that was the most recent time in the NFL that I could find of that rule being kind of in play in a big situation. Over time, obviously, we don't see it now, even though it's still on the books. We don't see it because eventually somebody's like, dude, just snap the ball, like play.
I'm imagining the first time I saw, I want to say it was Drew Bledsoe for the Patriots, kick a drop kick. First time I'd ever seen that.
Doug Flutie.
That's Doug Flutie,
yeah.
Doug Flutie kicking a drop kick for 2 points?
Two.
I don't even
remember the rule now. Yeah, I know he did it.
But I remember it happening and just thinking, What in the world is he doing? But it's a rule.
Yep.
It was a thing. I didn't know. But just imagine watching football the next Sunday that comes, and imagine a referee throwing a flag against your home crowd because they're too loud. They're interfering too much in the outcome of the game, and the ref penalizes your team.
5 yards, unsportsmanlike conduct.
I would freak out.
It would be a nightmare.
I would freak out.
For
I can't
whatever
believe it's still
league.
in the books. Hopefully it never gets called again.
Hopefully.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into forgotten Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question wildly held. Wildly held.
Wildly
Yeah.
and widely.
And widely.